Thanks for joining us on another episode of So What's Next? I'm your host, Jeremy Madore.
And I'm your co-host, Kristen Smith, and we are sitting here with
Debbi Mallinson from Magic Lamp Consulting.
Wonderful. Debbi, Magic Lamp Consulting. We had some off-air conversation in regards to the paranormal. Is there any tie-in there?
No. The name, when I was trying to think of a name, I'm like, okay, well, what do like executive directors want? And it's like, if they had a magic lamp and they could rub it, then they would have their wishes.
For sure.
And so most of them wish for money. Okay. And so that was that's where the name came from.
All right. So
I forgot your lamps. I give a token, a little lamp to my employees, interns, and strategic alliances.
Interesting.
Oh, that's
I like
cute.
that.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
That's good.
That's very cute.
We can call it an IOU. That's fine.
Yeah. For next time.
Tell me a little bit about like what Magic Lamp is, and I keep wanting to call it Magic Lantern, and obviously that's not the case. But Magic Lamp Consulting. Tell me a little bit about what it is and how you came about. How did this begin?
So, Magic Lamp Consulting is a nonprofit consulting firm, and we also, work with fundraising. I started the business in 2019. Really had my first client at the beginning of 2020, and just had planned it to be me. And after a couple of years and some coaching, my coach was like, you can make such an impact if you grew. And so now we have a team of 8, and I currently have 9 interns from Clark University.
Oh, okay. And what is it that you really focus on doing?
I work with small to mid-sized nonprofits, those typically that are very passion-driven. And for me, I came into this from IT, and so I had worked in IT most of my career, and I had a personal experience with a nonprofit that kind of changed my life, and so I was really, really close with my mother-in-law. She was like one of my very best friends. I know that a lot of mother-in-laws aren't, but she was awesome.
It's a tenuous relationship usually. But yes, continue.
Like we traveled together and everything, just the two of us. Yeah. Okay. And so we were really close. And then she was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer.
I'm sorry.
And thank you. And I was her caretaker. And I brought her over to the Virginia Thurston Healing Garden, which is an integrative cancer support center in Harvard.
Okay. Yeah.
And beautiful property. They've actually pivoted after COVID because now they have hybrid programs. You can go in person or virtual.
Oh, okay.
But when we went there, I thought we were going for her, to get support for her. And when we were there, I learned that they had programs for families and caregivers.
Yeah.
And I joined.
Who supports the supporters.
Yeah. And I joined the caregiver support group, which was run by a social worker, and everybody in the room had the same journey. And for me, the light switch switched when one day she looked at me and she's like, I think you should write her a love letter. Because I met her when I was 17. Actually, my grandmother had just died of colon cancer. Oh, wow. Kind of full circle there. And so I met her when I was 17, had no idea like how close we would become. And so, the journey was crazy. And so the social worker had looked at me and she's like, I think you should write her a love letter. And I was, 50. So I had, known her since I was 17. And it's like, okay, like, what do you do,
And then summarize a life. That's 33 years.
Right. And I just woke up one night. It was like 2:00 in the morning, went down to my computer, and it just flowed. And it started from like when I walked in the door when I was 17 and she was playing the piano. And then, our trips to Europe together, and we were in photo club together. And she helped take care of the kids. And so it was like a chronological journey of the things that we had done together. And for me, that was life-changing.
Sure.
And so when she passed, I actually volunteered at the Healing Garden for 3 months, and it was pre-COVID, and was writing grants for them. At that time, they were mostly donor funded. And what we discovered when COVID hit in March of 2020 was that a lot of people were losing their jobs, a lot of companies were closing, and those donations slowed down significantly. And the development director had looked at me one day and said, I think that if you weren't here doing this, we would have closed. And so, because the grants were starting to come in.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was a pivotal moment. And so my clients, typically the clients that I have it's all passion driven.
Yeah.
So we kind of, when we talk, we interview each other. It's not just, me wanting them to hire me. It's like, is it a fit?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so for me, I look for the passion driven executive director,
Right.
and somebody that I can really engage with on a personal level.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you need to be able to onboard with their story in order to really truly support their cause.
Right.
And if you can't align with that, then it's going to be an uphill battle for both of you. Circling back, if you don't mind, what was your mother-in-law's name, so we can kind of honor
Anne.
her? Anne.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for
Thanks.
sharing that. That must have been a really heavy moment in your life, and very pivotal, it sounds, for more than just the grief of it, but also the acknowledgement of the support services that existed and the need to support the support services that support the supporters.
Right.
There's so much meta in there,
so
right?
much, yeah.
Like there's so many layers in that though, but like that's the pipeline of humanity.
Right.
So,
and so
you're at the beginning of the pipeline though, right? Like, cause maybe not the beginning,
No.
but you're assisting the people that are at the base level.
right.
Or am I reading that wrong?
No, we typically it's a small organization that we work with. Not all of them, but most of them are small organizations, and they don't typically have a development team.
Yeah.
So we come in, we actually have a financial analyst on our team as well. We have an IT analyst who we have portals so that we can share information.
Okay.
And we can work on documents at the same time.
Yep.
Grant writers. And so, we come in with a team that they probably don't have. Most
Sure.
of them don't have.
Yeah. You have a
And
support
so-
staff that they can't even fathom.
Right. And so it's kind of, a lot of it is business development. A lot of executive directors get into it because they're passion driven and don't really always know the requirements of a nonprofit. There's certain things that you have to do every year. You have to file your annual report. You have to file for a certificate of solicitation. You have to do your 990s and your taxes. And so there's certain requirements, and some small organizations are just so caught up in the day-to-day because there's so much need in the community
Right.
Sure.
that some of that other stuff gets lost.
Yep.
And so that's something that we can come in and put some structure around.
Okay. All right. So the spirit behind Magic Lamp, I can understand, the meaning behind the name. What is it that you're able to position other nonprofits through or by or with that gives them, is it just a support staff type of approach, or is there an advantage with how you go about doing what you do that is different from just simply having support staff?
I think because we work with so many nonprofits, we've seen so many things. So we come in with a lot of expertise. We have a grant software that I've actually, because I was in IT, worked with them to do their upgrade. And he said we have the most grants in his system. We are his super user. And we've only been around for 5 years. We just had our 5th anniversary. And he said we had almost 3,000 grants in the system.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That you've like
that
wrote
our
and
team,
got.
That you've
that our
penned.
team.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the two of my team were looking at our numbers, and they actually reported to me, because we're doing an annual report, that we're a little under 20 million since raised in partnership with our nonprofits in the last 5 years.
My word.
Wow, that's $4
So-
million a year on average, and inclusive of your beginner year, right? And so your beginning year, obviously.
Actually, the beginning year was fabulous because it was COVID and they had all that money.
Oh, okay, that's fair. That's fair. You know, when I hear COVID, I don't hear good years.
Yeah.
It's true.
For us, normally, I mean, even our industry was definitely shook up quite a bit, but it was still a good year for us in that there was adoption on product lines that wasn't there before. Like, for example, you know, video walkthroughs became a really important thing because the local realtor boards were essentially requiring virtual tours as part of the listing package so that it could mitigate the need for having people on site. And so certain product lines boomed. But generally speaking, most businesses did not. And so we were counted among the ones that were able to have fairly good fortune during COVID, which it almost feels shameful to say, kind of, you know what I mean? But
it's the ability to pivot, you know?
Right.
And so when
For
you
sure.
look at like these nonprofits, you know, and a lot of them, if, you know, the Healing Garden originally didn't have any plans on doing anything virtually. You know, their whole philosophy was being on their beautiful garden property, being with other people in person, which was a beautiful thing. But when COVID hit, you know, they were immune suppressed, they were higher risk. And so they pivoted and they went virtual. So instead of closing and having less people come in, they're actually, the number of people that they serve continues to grow and grow.
Okay.
And
have they maintained that virtual interface?
so they're doing a hybrid format now. So they do some things in person and some things virtually. And so they've actually expanded their footprint so they support people with cancer throughout the state.
Okay.
And and so it's great. And one of the things that when they were talking to me that was significant for them is when somebody's close to end of life, often they have to leave their support system because they can't get out of the house or they might be bedridden, you know. And so with the virtual format, they don't have to get dressed. They don't have to leave the house. They can have their support system and the people that they've been talking with still there with them. Wow. And so like that's something beautiful that came out of it.
Technology is great.
Yeah.
Technology is great when it's used for the benefit of humanity, right?
Right.
And that. I think in no other area is it as highlighted as end of life care, and that's a cause and a half to support. Are you still working with the garden?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm bad at names.
The Virginia
so, there we go.
Thurston Healing Garden.
That one.
Yes. So they were my first client and they are still a client.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So how did you, at that point, you knew you wanted to make a difference and you knew you wanted to start, you know, in this direction, but how did you go from like IT to grant writing? Like what was like how did you do that?
So I actually live in Leominster.
Yeah.
My kids went to Leominster Public Schools. There's a lot of need in the community. I got involved with the PTO, started, you know, helping with fundraisers. That's where I wrote my first grant. I was on the board.
Okay.
And so that was my exposure to doing the work.
But what a powerful change. Yeah. I mean, going from, you know, being in IT to raising millions of dollars for, like, that's crazy.
Yeah,
to me.
Nonprofit.
It's so awesome.
And we, you know, so we're doing our first annual report for our business. A lot of our clients do them, but for our business, we're doing our first.
What do you mean your first?
So we're doing an annual report that will give the story of what things look like over the last year.
Got it.
And give, you know, a client case study. It'll give information on the number of clients that served, because it's really not about the nonprofits, and the nonprofits will tell you that it's about the clients that they serve.
Right.
And so, like my team, we just got a notification that one of our clients got a $40,000 grant today. And so that was for Girls on the Run of Worcester County. And so it's not about, we got $40,000 for Girls on the Run. We got $40,000 to support youth development for young girls in elementary and middle school to help build social emotional skills, to help build teamwork, to help them be aware of, wellness. Yeah. And so our team, like internally, will send the announcement around that it's come through, and then what's the impact, or what new towns can they serve because they've received this grant.
Right. Yeah. Because there's also that extension of what you're capable of doing through that grant now just increases dramatically. And so it's not so much about serving your existing base better. It's about also adopting a new base that couldn't access you before, or you couldn't access them before, whether it be regionally or just simply volume. Jenny's helping.
Yeah,
they're mine.
That's where we met. We met through the chamber.
Right.
I call them. They're mine.
Yes,
that's wonderful.
We met through the chamber, and then
Jenny's comes to mind because Brandon
Absolutely.
and I, a month ago?
Yep, he was on the show about a month ago.
Yeah, and we sat down and we had a conversation about what need looked like for Jenny's, and over the years how that's changed and grown, and what nutrition. What lacking nutrition looks like now versus where it was prior to COVID, et cetera. Of course, like you have inflation, grocery prices, all that kind of stuff. But the point is that they've had to keep ahead of, as best as possible, ahead of the need that they are experiencing, only because of, for no other reason than to not have to say no to people.
Right.
And that's a really tough place to be when you're talking about funding. And because if you're not keeping those skids greased, then nothing else is happening.
And they don't say no to people, which is amazing. The only we actually just are working on a grant for them. They have an emergency shelter program, and that's the only program that they've had to say no to. That to have funding to put people up overnight. So they have an allotted amount.
Sure.
But the food pantry, they get a lot of stuff in kind. A lot of...
he was telling me about that stuff, and I'm like, it's obviously not the world that I live in, right? Obviously is a horrible word, but it's not the world that I live in. And to hear about it and learn about something that I was, maybe oblivious to or just ignorant of, it's humbling.
I think one of the things that's really surprising is, you thought that COVID was going to be the peak, and... No. It's grown significantly. He serves almost 4,000 people a month.
Right.
And that's like doubled since we started working with them.
Yep.
And for me, so we part of our pillars is we give back to the community. So we do that through volunteering is one of the ways. And so I volunteered at Ginny's for many years. And I think it was pretty humbling, when we were, I think it was a Thanksgiving meal. And I think people have a stereotype in their head of like what a person that's food insecure looks like. And so I remember seeing this dad and his daughter, and she was probably 15, had her Leominster High, jacket on, and they could have been you or me.
Yep.
100%.
Right. And so it's not, we're all so close to a couple paychecks away from having to be in that line and needing.
It's very true.
Yeah.
It's very true. Grocery bills have just gone out of control, and having growing kids is a very challenging thing, because it's only a matter of time until like that, that straw that broke the camel's back happens, right? We have my wife and I have 4 daughters, and our grocery bill on a monthly basis, it works out to almost $1,700. Wow! To support a family of 6, And that's massive. And we don't do prepared foods. This is all raw ingredient stuff. I think the most prepared food we might have in the house would be like Progresso soup, like that's the most prepared everything, and everything else is just raw ingredients or scratch. And so we're doing whatever we possibly can to, by avoiding lack of, foundational items. Like we always make sure that we're not skipping out on necessities, but we try to cut corners wherever we can without sacrificing that for the girls or for us ourselves, and it's getting only harder, and so that need is only ever rising. And thankfully we're able to support ourselves without having to worry about food insecurity. But to hear that an organization like Brandon, I always mess up on that detail of anybody's name. To see that his organization is supported by another organization that helps steer that organization. I didn't even know that existed. I just assumed that grant writing was something that the organization did for itself. And I didn't know that this resource even existed.
Yeah, it's interesting because a few funders, and it was in the very beginning, they would be like, oh, you have a grant writer? Well, why do you need funding? And it's like, well, no, we need a grant writer so we can get the funding. And so the executive director can focus on the work that they need to focus on, because they're the ones that are face of the organization. They're the ones that are out in the community. They're networking. They're running their organization, typically all hands on deck. And so if they don't have time to write the grants, then they don't get the grants.
Right.
And for me, I had somebody ask me before, like, what was the most impactful, grant that we got?
That was one of the things that was on my list.
And I won't say that there's one.
Yeah.
I will say that I was telling Brandon last week, actually, the one thing that I'm really, really proud of is we got funding for a lift for handicap accessible access to Jenny's. Okay. And so, he had clients that weren't able to access the space because there's 2 steps up. Mm-hmm. And so being able to get that lift and make that space accessible, like that feels awesome.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Such a trivial thing, 2 steps.
For some of us.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? So until it isn't.
Right.
And the barrier to entry is a very quick one.
Right.
Or a quickly imposed one if you have mobility issues. Yeah, that is impactful.
Yeah. So you must have to get pretty deep with your customers to understand their need, like from the very beginning, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of trust because we know pretty much everything in their organization.
Yeah,
because we're asking them, do you have a strategic plan? A lot of small nonprofits don't.
Yeah,
and so talking with them about trying to work with the board to develop a strategic plan, which a vision for the next 3 to 5 years, and then when they have a strategic plan, we can build a fundraising plan around that. I think one misconception for a lot of nonprofits is everybody's like, go get grants. Like it's so easy.
Yeah, just go get one.
And, typically that's not how it works. Typically, if you start a nonprofit, it's often self-funded. And then the circle gets a little bigger, and you two usually get in your friends and your family to help you, whether they're volunteering or they're giving money.
Or they're forced.
And then they're extending to their network. Who do you know? Who does your board know? To get them to support. And then it's like, okay, what are your revenue streams going to be? So if you're a youth organization, are you going to charge a fee? Are you not going to charge a fee? Maybe you offer scholarships. So that could be one revenue source. Do you get donations? Are you appealing for donations?
Yeah, and that's time consuming unto itself.
Right. And so we work with clients about diversifying, and we're setting up a little Greenlight, which is a donor database for a couple of our clients, so that they can start to do appeals and they can track who's been giving them funding and how much do they give, so they can figure out who to steward. Are they doing any fundraisers? So with Ginny's, I don't know if you went to the murder mystery that we did a couple years ago.
No, but we're going this year.
Okay, great.
Because the CLI group is actually helping him to expand it this year.
Yes,
So
that's what he was saying. Yeah.
It's going to be even bigger and better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had gone to, and you always get ideas from other nonprofits. So I had gone to a fundraiser for Habitat for Humanity of North Central Mass, and they had this murder mystery dinner up at the Old Mill.
Old Mill.
Yeah,
Yep.
up at the Old Mill. And it was so much fun. And I'm like, Brandon would love this because he loves theater.
Yep.
And so I brought him back the card, and then we started planning it, and people loved it.
Yep.
And the food, I'm going to put a plug in for my friend Tim from Big Belly Barbecue. He works for Gordon Ramsay.
Big Belly Barbecue?
Big Belly Barbecue, and it's not barbecue. Like he's like a gourmet chef.
Oh my
goodness. And so it was the most amazing.
Let's have him on the podcast.
It was like, you should.
We should.
It was a lemon chicken and
we need to talk food more.
yeah.
On the podcast, that's for
Honestly.
sure.
Oh, he does a lobster macaroni and cheese too.
Take my money.
But
Take my money.
but I mean, people raved about the food.
Yeah.
And so, sorry, just as like entrepreneurs, we'd like try to plug
Oh,
each
of
other.
course.
100%.
That's what we're about here.
Bring it on.
Give me a list.
Yeah.
We'll call him up.
So we had gone through E4All together.
Okay.
And so that was how I met him. And yeah, he does all kinds of stuff. He's amazing.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Fantastic. So do you have a grant writer that tries to get grants for you guys?
You know, that's a funny thing. We've talked about it. I've gotten a couple grants for us, but we're not a nonprofit. So we're a for-profit.
Oh, I missed that detail.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of people think we're nonprofit, but we are a for-profit organization.
Got it.
Because like I put my blood, sweat, and tears in it. And so like, you know, if you're a nonprofit, your board runs the organization.
Sure.
And so for me, I want to run the organization.
Yep.
So that's why.
No, that totally makes sense.
It does make sense. I misheard earlier on in our conversation. I thought that you guys were also a nonprofit. So that clears that up.
Yeah.
But okay. That takes the wind out of my sails for the rest of the questions that I had. That was attached to that. That's fine. Anything for you?
No, I was just curious kind of like what the process is kind of from beginning to end. So like if you went into a nonprofit, like for Brandon, like how did you begin? Like kind of what's your like 30-second like pitch to them? Like what can you do for them?
Usually I'm not having to pitch them. So most of my clients are word of mouth.
Okay.
And so they have talked to
That's
somebody
kind.
else that we've worked with. And so they already know what we do. They know the impact that we've made. So typically it's referral based. And so I actually was with Ginny's before Brandon was there. I was there with Sue. Sue had hired me and then Brandon came on. But yeah. So.
Yeah, Brandon did mention that he was recent when he was in here for the podcast, and he was talking to me about his predecessor having been there for a great number of years. How did you get connected with Sue?
So I knew of Ginny's anyway, but I think it was actually my neighbor Andrea that had connected us because she was volunteering there.
Okay.
And so she had made that connection.
All right. Wonderful.
Yeah.
I love it when small world hits.
Yeah.
Right. Like you came in and you talked about how you used to rent across the street from our driveway here. And, you know, of course we dovetailed into the paranormal after that, but it's just, I love it when the world becomes smaller and smaller and smaller because it helps you look at random individuals that you encounter as less random.
Well, and I think it's about lifting everybody up. So I did E4All. Do you know what that is?
Yep, I do.
I don't actually.
It's an entrepreneurship program. It's a free program.
Okay.
And you do a pitch and
Okay.
and then they select people to do it. It's a year-long program.
Okay.
3 months super intensive of, developing your business. And then the next 9 months you're still working with a mentor. And so
Did you do that through an incubator?
I actually did it virtually.
Okay.
So, so they're a program that's, I know Lowell has one.
Yep.
Yeah. And so we did all of ours virtually and I totally lost my train of thought. And so then that led me into E4Ever. And so that's a group that you've got established businesses and you meet once a month. And like those people that are in that, my group happens to be all women. Like we're all friends. Like we all became friends. Yeah. And then we talk about how can we work together? So like
Support.
Amy runs Visions internship. And so she's helped me with our internship program.
Nice.
And then, Melody takes photos and she's amazing. So she's Imperfect Joy and she's super talented. And so how can we strategically align and work together? My friend Jen from Gem Marketing, she changed the focus of her business. It used to be small businesses, and now she's focused exclusively on nonprofits.
Oh, that's a shift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. To go from the business sector to the nonprofit sector, that's a very large changeover for anybody. When you were working IT, were you doing corporate? Were you self-employed? What were you doing?
So I did corporate.
Okay.
I actually worked at Health Alliance Home Health and Hospice, which is a nonprofit.
Yeah.
But I wasn't involved really in the nonprofit aspect of it.
For you, the job of that was very similar to a job of a for-profit. Yeah, I can understand that. And through the changeovers that you've had over the years, I'm sure that you've also, since beginning this, had a lot of eye-opening moments through conversation with nonprofits. What's something that really sticks out to you? You had discussed what you felt was one of the more impactful moments with the chairlift at Ginny's. What are one of the biggest ahas that you've encountered along the way?
Again, I think it's people jump in because they find something that they're so passionate about, and they may not be a business person and they may not know what those requirements are. And so I've had a couple organizations that hadn't filed their taxes. If you don't file your taxes for 3 years, you can lose your nonprofit status.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I had one organization that, we were within a couple of days of them. I just started with them the end of last year. And like right away, I'm like, you're going to lose your nonprofit status if you don't file your taxes. And so they scrambled and were able to do it, and they're good. But if we hadn't connected, she wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
And so
that's a game changer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I would think those are the things. A lot of executive directors don't necessarily know how to budget. And so what I found when we work with the small nonprofits is a lot of them will do an org budget, and then the next year it'll be like, okay, well, I'll increase the price 5% or whatever. But have you thought about what your programs are going to be this year? And so have you broken out your program budgets? Because a lot of funders want to fund programs and not organization like general operating.
Okay.
And so
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so what we were finding is they had an org budget and they had program budgets and they didn't align. And so now we work with them to develop the program budgets that roll up to the org budget. So it takes into consideration the salaries. It takes, the other thing is a lot of them don't track in kind. And so if you get in kind donations, that's significant because it shows your impact. And so if you're not tracking it, I have one organization that I worked with when I started with them. I think they've been 3 years. Their on paper budget was $160,000, but if you saw what they were doing, it wasn't $160,000 worth of work. And once we started tracking, the food that was donated, the clothing that was donated, the toys that were donated, they are now at 1.6 million, including their in kind.
That's 10x.
Right.
Yeah.
And
huge.
it's not that they grew 10 times. They've grown since then, but it was that they weren't accounting for it. Yeah. And so when people looked at them and like, oh, well, they're a nice little nonprofit.
Not so little.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but does that allow them to have a bit more strength in arms when it comes to grant writing? If the paperwork shows that officially they are operating at this kind of budget versus the smaller budget, does that impact one way or another their ability to get grants?
It can,
Okay.
And you really have to know your funder, because we did have one organization that was like, you're not a $1.6 million organization. And so they wanted to see the budget different. And so they wanted to see all the actual expenses in one column. And then in the second column, they wanted to see the in-kind.
Okay.
And then the total together.
Sure.
So that they could see money-wise what was coming in and coming out.
Yeah.
Now, are you talking in kind as in like just somebody bringing clothes there or bringing food there, or what are you talking?
So a lot of food pantries, they get food from grocery stores, from like a BJ's, so that whatever's donated is in kind, but also you have in kind volunteer hours.
Yep.
And so the independent sector every year comes out with a rate for volunteer hours. And so
and
if
what
you
can assign
track,
to it.
and I think it's $40.86, because if you were to have an employee, you would be paying their salary.
Yeah.
You would be paying their taxes. You would be paying their benefits.
That's actually reasonably high.
Yes.
That's nice.
You would be paying for office space. And so what would the cost be?
Mm-hmm.
And so, because if you didn't have those volunteers, then you'd have to pay somebody.
Sure.
Right.
So like Habitat for Humanity during COVID, they weren't allowed to have people on site.
So their in-kind contributions went down a lot.
Right.
Because
but they still needed to build the house.
That's complicated.
That is complicated.
That's very complicated.
That's a Jenga tower with only one thing.
Yeah, I don't. There's too many steps in that for Kristen. That's too many steps.
That wasn't where I was going. That's fine. Yeah. So I think that right there, what Kristen just said, summarizes the complexity of the job that you provide, or the position that you provide, because that's a journey fraught with pitfalls, and to have an ally in a nonprofit's corner that really knows the ins and outs, that has researched and done grants for other institutions or other organizations rather, and has been there, done that.
And has that huge of a success rate.
Well, and it's amazing because I actually did have a part-time job doing grants, and the impact, because I was the only person. And they didn't have historically a grants person. And so now I'm trying to get them to define their programs. You're trying to get buy-in. It was a school, and the teachers wanted nothing to do with it. And so, they had enough on their plate. They didn't want to worry about grants. And so we didn't have the buy-in there. But I was one person, so now I'm having to do all the research myself, as to who are we going to approach? How does it align? Which program are we going to go after? Making sure that you have your objectives and your measures of success. And so, my success rate wasn't great when I was there.
Sure. You're also cutting your teeth.
And so they had a development director, and honestly, if she hadn't said to me, I don't think you were set up for success in this environment, I don't know if this would have been the path I had taken. But when I go in now, I already have because I work exclusively in Massachusetts, because I want to know who the funders are.
Sure.
And so when we walk in the door, if you were a nonprofit and you said, okay, I'm a youth serving nonprofit in central Massachusetts, I'm already in my head saying, okay, this funder, this funder, this funder.
Yeah.
Because I know historically who's given to other programs that are similar to yours. I have in my system what their grant cycles are. I'm not having to look it up. I know typically what their grant range is because I have a lot of nonprofits, and so I have the grant history of what they've given in the past. I may have personal connection with the foundation.
That's invaluable, all of that.
It's not a walk in the park for you, but you're armed with information that they may not have readily available at their fingertips.
Right.
So while it might not be a been there, done that, it's hey, I'm really familiar with this. And that familiarity is giving them a step up, and it's supporting them a lot better than them having to start from the ground up. So you're
more efficient.
Yeah, that's wonderful. How does somebody go about securing your services, I guess is the best way to say it?
So historically, so you go on our website and you fill out our contact form.
Yeah.
That's the best way to get a hold of us. And we have different services. And so up until January this year, the options were you could have on-demand consulting. If you could book an hour, talk about anything that you need. In that we do grant research. That's another package that we have.
Okay.
And then most of our clients, like 95% of our clients, are premium clients. And so it's kind of soup to nuts. We're giving them what they need. So again, I'm helping with a 25th anniversary for one of my clients. We help with the fundraiser. Yep. We're helping with donor databases. We're helping with budgets. And so that's the premium package. And what we were having a really hard time with was how do the really small nonprofits get in? Because it's cost prohibitive.
Of course, yeah.
Most of them haven't budgeted. Like they need grants, but they haven't budgeted to hire somebody
sword,
to
right?
to pay for the grants. And so we just recently got registered through the Massachusetts Workforce Express Fund. And do you know what that is? Because it's pretty awesome.
Vaguely, but go into detail.
So with the Express Fund, if you are an organization, for-profit and nonprofit, that pays into the tax system, then you are eligible for up to $15,000 reimbursable training per year. And so we have designed courses that nonprofits can take through the Workforce Training Fund that takes them through the process that we have. Okay, what does grant readiness look like? What does program development look like? And so they can sign up for the class. When they're done with the class, then they get reimbursed. Then they take that money and they put it up to the next class. And so they can take, several 5 sessions. They can take 5 sessions of classes, and it's reimbursed. And you know what? When you're applying for grants, it takes about 5-6 months to start seeing stuff come in.
That was one of my questions: is how long is a process?
Yeah, because it's typically the first 6 to 8 weeks, you're doing your grant readiness stuff. Yep. And it really depends on how prepared the organization is. If they don't have a strategic plan, okay, that's a problem. That's going to be longer.
There's a lot of foundational work.
Right. If they don't have a budget, okay, you have time for that. And so the first couple months, you're getting to know the organization. You're learning about what they do, what their programs are, and then you're doing grant research. So what aligns? And then you're looking at the funders and saying, okay, what are their grant cycles? Because this one might have been a great match, but the deadline was last month. Wow. And so we're doing a grants calendar so that we, people I know sometimes talk about the grant season, which I don't think there is a grant season because you have some grants that are open spring and fall. But there's so many grants that are rolling. And so we evenly pace throughout the year the grants that we write. So we're not writing all in one month. We're writing some every single month.
Like a CPA who does taxes for April 15th, and that's it. Yeah,
right,
that's hard. Yeah.
But so not knowing when those deadlines are. And then once you apply, it's usually 3 months. Sure. Some are a little less, some are longer. Yeah,
there's a lot that I've never thought about.
Do you have a memory of the largest grant that you've been able to help secure?
I knew one of them was over 600,000. Wow. And that was for a youth development program, film. And so that was fun.
Film? Mm-hmm. Tell me.
So there's an organization called Fresh Films. They actually run a program at Fitchburg High and also at the Spanish American Center in Leominster. Okay. I actually am really, really proud because we brought them to North Central Mass. I started working, I had a funder that referred them to me, and they wanted somebody to help them with their Boston programs. Okay. And so we helped them with Boston, and I'm like, we really need that out here. And so we ended up bringing them out here. They had a program at the Boys and Girls Club. It's now at the Spanish American Center. It's grown, and they have done the program over at Fitchburg High. They have a summer program, like the kids got to tour the set There was a movie that Lisa Kudrow was in that they were filming in Leominster, and the
Yeah.
kids got to tour the set of that.
That's awesome.
They've been able to tour New England studios.
Okay.
And so that was a grant through the city of Boston that we got. And the thing that was cool is the grant funded the youth. So the youth got paid to participate in the program.
Oh.
So that way a child, that works to help support their family, they can't, often they miss the opportunities for these enrichment programs.
They'd have to surrender or sacrifice the potential income that they would have made during that time.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that really is a hamstring.
Yeah. So a lot of funders are recognizing that now, but when we did it, I didn't know anybody else that got paid, for
amazing.
taking an after school program. And so that's
That's unique.
Pretty significant.
I guess I just assumed that all of them nobody ever got paid. Like
that's incredible.
That's a concept that I don't think ever occurred to me.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the community, so like for Fresh Films, they are specifically targeting low-end communities, diverse communities, people that don't have a traditional pathway into the film industry. Because if you look into at the film industry, it's mostly white, and so a lot of youth of color have no idea how to break into that.
Sure.
And so Fresh Films brings their programs to those communities, and they provide that pathway. So they do an after-school program, they do a summer program, they do internships. My son actually went through the program as well.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, it's really uplifting to learn about businesses that I never even considered to exist. Because a business such as yours is hidden away from the community prominently anyway, because it's not a while you're serving the general public by extension,
right?
You don't just have somebody walking off the street and be able to work one-on-one with them. It's more of a one-on organization kind of thing, and so it's like that the man behind the curtain, so to speak, that keeps everything running. And so it's nice to see behind that curtain for a little while and learn more about that.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm really glad that we had you here today. Is there anything particular that's missing from your business or from the organizations that you're working with that you'd like to really focus on for the coming year?
So our area of growth, besides the Workforce Training Fund, has really been with everything that's going on, politically right now and funding. And even before, the last, couple months. Last year, funders were seeing an unprecedented number of people applying for grants.
Okay.
And so it could have been a funder that funded you for 5 years, and then last year they might have said, we're going to give it to somebody else. And so it's really, we're focused this year on making sure that our clients have diversified revenue streams.
Okay.
So maybe you have a third in grants, maybe you have a third in donations, and then a third in fundraising or some type of revenue, so that if one falls off, you can lean on the others.
Yeah. Okay. That's a big one, and that's regardless of the political market, if you would, or I guess atmosphere. Because regardless of what's going on governmentally, that's still important to have a diversified revenue stream. And it's only ever highlighted when things get even more challenging. Right. It's very similar to us during COVID. Right. Had we not been able to do virtual tours and walk through videos, that would have really impacted us very negatively. We were fortunate enough to have already been set up for that, and we just were able to adapt pretty quick. Others are not so lucky, and so that's a good PSA right there. And so anybody who's really listening and is involved in any business transactions, which is a lot of people, it's really important to focus on making sure that regardless of the market, you're able to just kind of just change lanes in a controlled manner.
Well, even for us, like we have the different packages. And so we have the on-demand consulting or the grant research, and so we have diversified our revenue streams as well. Yep. So it's just good business sense.
Yeah, for sure. So just in the interest of serving other businesses, we also hold, does Debbie know about the social media
She might
thing?
not.
Okay.
She might not.
So here in the studio, once per month, actually twice this month, we do social media classes, where, we usually have about 15 to 20 seats available. People come in, learn about how to, honestly excel and utilize their social media presence for their businesses the best. Brandon attends them, and then quite a few others also attend. And I would encourage the message to get out there, and even to your own organizations that you're working with, to avail themselves of information like that, especially here in the Fitchburg area, because it's one thing to do it online, and it's readily available online globally. Like it's not hard to come by somebody who runs a social media program or whatever, right? But to do it in person is a whole other dynamic, because you now generate ideas on the fly with people right there, or you hear hubbub about some idea that someone else had and you can adopt it for your own purposes, or you just leave with this, you exude confidence when you're walking out of the room, saying to yourself, I can do this because I have the tools, I have the support, I have the coaching. And so we offer that through the studio once per month, and this month twice, because we're doing a night program as well.
Yep.
And so I just wanted to put that out there for you to be aware of.
So that's great. And my interns this semester are marketing interns.
Okay.
So I think we can talk offline
Yeah,
to
that'd be
see.
great.
Yeah, I'll definitely send you that. We just posted the one for April, so I
Okay.
can send you that information. And it's been a great camaraderie, just like, I know Brandon's gotten some ideas already. That fashion show thing that he's doing.
Yeah.
He got that idea here.
Oh, that's
and
great.
It's like, everyone is just
and he's
really
hysterical with his hat.
I
Did you
know.
say?
That's it. Yes, somebody here told him to do that.
Yeah.
And now it's like turned into like they're actually going to do this whole fashion show. And it's like, it's just awesome to see. Like, I'll introduce a topic and then we'll talk about that. But then everyone in the room is just sharing, and we just want to empower people to be able to move forward. And, social media is always changing, like every 5 minutes. So, we've had success, and we just want to share that with others and find out, what's holding people back,
A lot of times people are holding themselves back because that's not true. Let me rephrase that. A lot of times what people are experiencing for a holding back is a fear of not doing it the right way, or a fear of what they don't know. And instead of venturing out and taking a chance or a risk, they play it safe because they've been burned in the past, or their nervous system isn't set up for it, or there's a variety of factors that are at play, particularly when you're talking about investing money in hopes of getting it back, right? Like that's a really hard line to walk, right? And kudos to you for having that workforce training ability to onboard people who can't afford, the classes and the initial training. But a lot of people don't even know that stuff like that exists, or some organizations can't do it because they're not set up to structure themselves that way. There's a bunch of reasons that might be true. So what we chose to do ourselves is to host this class once a month for free, just to get people really introduced to the concept of how to go about managing social media, and encouraging them to delve a little bit deeper than they already are. And the best part about it is that it's strictly just a time investment. And to have it just be a time investment, all they need to do is bring their phone, and for the most part, everybody has one. And so it's just one of those things where now that becomes your mobile computer, and a lot of the stuff that we teach is doable by the person who's attending.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even
just
require our involvement on the lowest level.
Yep.
It's when people step up their game that, we offer to become more involved. But to get people off the ground from doing barely anything at all, or sometimes even nothing, to getting to that, okay, I got the hang of it thing. It's like riding a bike, and eventually letting go of that seat or letting go of the bike or the handlebars is what we're hoping for that individual
great.
to have.
But it's just like with the chamber. Like, we met at a chamber event. We just ended up at the same table.
Okay.
And that's how we met. We just started talking, and, and I was like, I love your story. I'd love to have you on the podcast. But like you were saying earlier, it's all about those connections. And it's like, we moved our business into this area. I've lived in Westminster my whole life, so I'm familiar. My parents grew up in Fitchburg. But coming back into this area, it was like we didn't know a lot of people. We didn't know a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
But the chamber has just opened up so many people. And like you said, like I'm friends with a lot of people in those groups now, like good friends,
Right.
you know?
Right.
It's like this community is really amazing.
Yeah.
Really, really good. So we want to give back to our community by doing these classes and just, you know, inviting people into our beautiful space and sharing what we know. And, you know, we're not looking to get anything out of it. We just really want to empower people and show them that they can do it, you know?
That's wonderful.
So,
Because there's a lot of power in the human spirit. And I think a lot of us just keep it kind of tucked away because it's safe, you know, and it's when we realize our own potential that things get awesome. And to see, Kristen was sharing with me some feedback that she got from the most recent class that she held. And there was someone recorded a video clip of themselves talking to Kristen. And so they left a video voice message. And she was near tears almost the entire voice message. Not Kristen, but the person who sent the message.
but when she sent it, I was almost in tears
no doubt.
too. I was like,
No doubt. But
this is why we do what we do.
to see the impact that even this low level education and conversation is having on small business owners, you know, and obviously we're not working with nonprofits nearly as much as we are working with for-profit business. But in the end, like it's very transferable data, you know, the education applies. And it's just really heartwarming and uplifting, and it's extremely encouraging to see that
It's
kind
amazing.
of buy-in. So
That's the favorite. That's literally my favorite part of my job is having people understand how amazing they are. When they start telling me their story, you know, I'm like, you don't understand.
Yeah.
Like you need to tell people that story,
Yeah.
you know?
that's why I paused when you started talking about that blue collar job
Yeah.
that came in
Yeah.
to attend one of our classes. To see a blue collar, like a contractor, for example, come in and attend a social media class, that's very different because I'm a contractor's son. My brothers are all contractors. They swear against social media like you wouldn't even believe, primarily. And it's not so much against like, you know, like there's like some tinfoil hat kind of approach. I'm talking about like literally, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to market. My work should be my marketing. You know what? Traditionally, I would agree with you. However, that's not the world that we live in now. And to see somebody attend these classes and start basically tearing down their own walls and absorbing this information and growing, it's really encouraging because that shows a shift in the market in regards to the mentality. And if that's affecting a blue collar community, a service contracting community in the way that it obviously is, that's a telltale sign that things are heading in the more social based direction in I think an uplifting fashion. Cause we're talking about primarily using social media for the benefit of others, not the benefit of self. Right. Cause like this is so easy to just get on a soapbox and talk about whatever you want. Well, that's fine. But if you get this image of perfection or it's too polished or whatever, it doesn't resonate with people. Breaking down all those barriers and walls, and you're really talking to somebody one-on-one or one-on-many, but nonetheless, you're talking to the viewer. That's a whole other dynamic. And that's the kind of marketing that we talk about. And so anyway, I just that's a very long way of saying your clients are invited too. And Kristen can definitely pass along that information.
Yeah,
to you.
absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds great.
For sure. Yeah, and we'll continue our work with Brandon.
Yeah.
For sure. That's been very rewarding. And
He's amazing.
yeah.
I know that you're deriving a lot of value from that, and I definitely encourage that.
Yep. For sure.
I won't force her to edit herself back in, but I will talk about the fact that Taylor did just stop on camera, and she may have cut herself out. So there you go. I'm going to leave some little clues behind. So on this show, we have a guest draw a card from here, and they're just point blank questions. If you don't like the question, put it back. If you like the question, read it out loud and then give your answer.
Okay.
Okay.
So looking ahead to the upcoming year, what are you most looking forward? So for me, I think it's the impact that we're going to be able to make now that we launched the Workforce Training Fund in January, because people that didn't have access
This is recent.
will now have access.
I
yes.
didn't understand that. Okay.
Yes. Yep. We had our first class in January.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That's good.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a new dynamic that you're going to have to monitor and adjust and kind of figure out, how to navigate it effectively. But that's beautiful. That's a wonderful way to start the year.
Right. Yeah, because that was the audience that struggled. Like they're the ones that need the help the most.
Yeah.
They're the ones that I love working with. And so it's like, how do we do this? How do we figure this out? And that was why we decided to go and sign up as a vendor.
Please have Debbi come back on in about a year. And I'd like to kind of see where you're at with all of this, because my goal personally is to see the arc of growth that people go through. And you know what? Growth is even the wrong word. The arc that they go through, right? And we call it success, we call it growth, and it's just that squiggly ball of yarn, right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see what kind of developments happen between now and then, and kind of circle back on this conversation and kind of see where you're at that point. Because to me, it's not about some end goal. It's about the process to get there. And these kinds of conversations, hearing about what people are up to and why they're up to it and the impacting factors and all this kind of stuff, that's really where the meat and potatoes are for me. That's purpose. That's fulfillment. Well, that's not true. Purpose is the journey. Fulfillment is when I see in the rearview mirror, be like, yeah, that's exactly what, I was hoping for that person. So I'd like to extend that to you as well.
Thank you.
So, I've really enjoyed this.
Me too.
And I hope that,
Thank you so
yeah,
much.
thank you
for coming.
Yeah.
I hope that you walk out of here with a more uplifted spirit, than you arrived. Not to say that it was not, just saying I hope that your day is made better by this interaction.
Thank you.
So.
Yeah, that was very nice.
Yes, it was. It was indeed.
Thanks, Debbi.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.